You are listening to the Estheticians Earning More Podcast with Brittany Hageman, episode number 149. Hello and welcome. Today is not a usual podcast day. So I just want to make a disclaimer before we get started that this is not a typical business podcast that you will get from me. As you know, today is Wednesday. It's actually a special day why I'm dropping this on a Wednesday. I'm going to be sharing my story, my postpartum story, having my baby. So if this is not interesting to you, or topics about anxiety, depression, infant death, any kind of sensitive topic like that, then totally don't listen. No hard feelings. I will be back next Monday with a normal episode. But I really wanted to record. I wanted to record this episode since I started my podcast. Mostly because I did have such a difficult time postpartum, and I really want my story to be known, and I also want people to have more awareness about maternal mental health. So today is Maternal Mental Health Day in the United States. It's May 1st. And like I said before, I've been thinking about this podcast for so long because I have a lot to say on it, and I have a lot of opinions, and just overall frustrations that I think really need to be brought to light in our country around postpartum and pregnancy with women and all of that. So I just wanted to kind of tell you what it is today, and also it did affect my business a lot. So I will be talking about my business a little bit through this, but mostly it's a personal story. The first thing I'm going to say is that my story is not normal, but it is common. And so what I mean by that is if you talk to a doctor, OBs or like therapists or anyone who works in and with postpartum women or people, they would not say that this is like they see it frequently, but it does happen more than you think. So I really want you, the reason I want you to hear my story is so if you've experienced it as well, I want you to feel like somebody else out there has experienced something that you have, and I think that can make it feel a lot less shameful. And make you feel like, this happened to you, not something that you created, which I think is a common thing that we hear, especially when it comes to mental health and anything to do with being a mother. And if you, don't have kids, or you already had your kids and this is like completely foreign to you, I hope that this will give you some empathy and compassion for people if you experience this out, if you have your own children that decide to have children, or friends or family or colleagues. If you start to see these symptoms, you can identify kind of what's happening and not be like kind of in the dark like so many of my loved ones were. Also, a super, super, super important point for me to make is I am so aware, and I was so aware of my privilege throughout my pregnancy, postpartum, as a white upper middle class woman in the United States. But I know that you'll hear my story. I was ignored a lot and overlooked and not taken too seriously. And as a white woman, that usually doesn't happen. And so I know that there are so many women of color that are ignored way more than I could understand and dismissed. And symptoms for like health symptoms, preeclampsia, other pregnancy symptoms that could be very dangerous, death-threatening, look different in women of color than they do in white women. And because of that, so many practitioners flat out ignore women of color when they are describing symptoms that could eventually lead to death of their baby, or serious complications. And I know I'm telling you, this is a lot of heavy stuff, but it's a huge, huge problem. I just looked up some statistics. So according to the CDC, study done in 2021, Black women died 2.6 times the rate of white women. So like essentially double. Like I think there was like it said like 66, almost 67 black like 0.7, you know how it is like 67 black women died and like 30 white women died in 2021. And so there's so much injustice. So I just really want that to be known that I know I had a better experience than probably so many women out there, and that is horrifying because I did not have a good experience. Okay, so I'm gonna try to keep it as short and sweet as possible because I could talk literally for like hours about this, but I will quickly kind of summarize what I went through and what I hope for you to take away from it, that you can just bring awareness to all of it. So I got pregnant. I found out I was pregnant the last day of January in 2020. And then, March 2020, everything changed. And so 2020 was already a rough year to be pregnant, to be having a baby, quarantine, COVID, there was so much uncertainty. I actually was just watching, I've been like, the TV show Going Back. I know, Drift Actually, I used to like, he's totally over reality TV. I'm back in fire. And it was the season of COVID, and I just like was watching it and started to get really anxious. Like I kind of forgot about it. I feel like I have really buried a lot of what it was like. I'm sure we all have. So one of my pregnancy symptoms that came very quickly was severe nausea. And I was never diagnosed. We call it HG. There's a much longer medical term where that women that like are vomiting nonstop, but like they eat hot flies, but they don't have enough fluids. I didn't have that severity. Again, this was my whole story. I was never severe enough that people took me seriously, but I was suffering, both pregnancy and postpartum. Both times I was suffering tremendously, but not to the point that people were like, oh, this is too much. And that was like crazy to me. I was like, remember my first midwife appointment, my husband came with me before, everything was shut down and we were so excited. And I was like, I am nauseous 24/7. Like there's certain things that women can do to kind of lessen their nausea. Like if they're full or like they're always eating, there's like a bunch of different things. Nothing helped. I couldn't sleep because I was sick all night long. If I vomited, I would feel 10 times worse, and it would take even longer for me to even like be able to sit up. It was actually a good thing that COVID happened because it was so hard for me to work. It was so hard to sit and to talk to people and just like put on a happy face and not get sick and not like get grossed out by extractions. Of course, I got so grossed out by extractions, which was horrifying to me, but I loved them. I literally could not eat anything. And I felt that way nonstop from when I was 6 weeks pregnant until I was about 22 weeks pregnant. And that's about 5 months. It's 5 months of imagining like a severe summer flu where you can't eat around food, you can't talk around food, you can't smell food, you can't eat food. Yet you're hungry and baby is growing that needs nutrients. It was just, I was so miserable. And this is like a theme in my story because as miserable as I was being pregnant, I was so, so, so happy to be pregnant. Like, so, so happy. I've never been happier in my entire life than when I found out I was pregnant. This is what I've been waiting for. I was so excited finally to have a baby. It was a healthy pregnancy. I was so grateful. I didn't experience miscarriages or anything that so many people go through. I was on cloud nine and completely physically miserable. And that was a really hard thing to deal with mentally because I was so grateful and so happy and so miserable at the same time. And it was like, how can these both things be so true at the same time? Like, please, somebody give me a drug. They would not give me any medication. They were just like, yeah, this happens. Yep, this happens. Like, of course, I started researching a lot of this stuff because when you're so miserable, you spend a lot of time trying to figure out how not to be miserable. And I learned that in the 1920s, OBs, doctors, believed and taught that nausea, morning sickness, whatever, was not real with pregnancy, and that women imagined it for attention. And you know what? That belief, that attitude is 1000% true. I met a number of OBs, met a number of midwives. Nobody really cared. It was just kind of like, yeah, this is just kind of being pregnant. Like, kind of get over it, you know? Um, and to be perfectly honest with you, my mom had 3 kids and she had a really easy pregnancy. I mean, I think she, like, her back hurt and stuff because she had really big babies, but she never experienced nausea or any, like, major pregnancy problems. And so I did also have the belief that, like, it can't be that bad. Like, my mom was, and I like didn't think I would get nauseous because she didn't. So like that feels like legitimate for me, right? Oh, I was so wrong. And like I would know women, like one of my good friends had been hospitalized in her pregnancy because she was sick so much. I did believe her. I didn't like think she was telling a lie, but I felt like I kind of felt like if that happens to me, it's fine because I'll be pregnant and that's all that will matter. And I really did believe that. And then I was pregnant and I was so happy and so miserable. And it was just so hard mentally to get through the days being like hating it so much and also wanting it so much. So that was basically my pregnancy. And the end of my pregnancy, the nausea did get better where I wasn't constantly nauseous, but I was kind of like how a lot of people are in the first trimester where they just eat constantly to not be nauseous. So I could eat and like I only could eat like sugary white bread, like fried food. I drank a lot of Sprite. It tasted so good. It was like the first time I could actually taste food and eat food. It was like, again, months of like not being able to eat. I would have just like dry Cheerios a couple at a time and just like take deep breaths and hope I wouldn't vomit it for like 5 months. I mean, I just really want to keep reminding, like, there was no break. There was no relief. It just got worse. It got worse and worse and worse. So I finally could eat. And so I didn't gain any weight. And I didn't really care about gaining weight in pregnancy, but that the providers and midwives and doctors are very concerned about that. That is a big priority for them. And I know that there was health concerns if you gain a lot of weight, like you could have blood pressure, which is like, but I started gaining weight rapidly at the end of my pregnancy. Probably gained like 25 pounds in like a couple of weeks. I also was much more pregnant and my daughter was growing rapidly as well. But I was like finally like enjoying my pregnancy. Like I could eat and not be like I was miserable if I wasn't eating, but at least if I was eating, I felt good. And like I could drink soda. Like I never had something taste so good. Sprite at the time. Really had OB and I had never seen her before. And at the end of your pregnancy, you go all the time. Even COVID, we still went all the time. And she just shamed me how much weight I had gained. Like, this is the first thing she said. I'd never met her before. She walked in. It's the first thing she said to me. It was like, you gained too much weight. You're gaining weight way too rapidly. And it was just so insane. It was so insane to me. And I remember looking at her and being like, I could finally eat. Like, do you not know I haven't been eating? And she's like, yeah, but So it was just, I felt so dismissed. And then I finally felt better and they shamed me. So anyways, I had my baby in October. Birth went really well. I ended up getting induced, which was not what I could have chosen it, but it ended up being a really positive experience. Really, really positive experience. And then we had a nurse in the postpartum care. And if you've had a baby, I know this is the universal thing. People really hate the postpartum nurses, and the labor delivery nurses were incredible. But the postpartum, when you're still in the hospital, they tend to be awful, like awful. And I'm not the only one to have had these experiences. And so the first nurse Like, and when your baby is brand new, they're firstborn, they sleep like the first day. Like you're like, I remember my husband was like, everyone lied, like she's just sleepy by herself in the like bassinet. Like she's just laying there and it's like she's totally fine. Yeah, then they wake up and they don't sleep as easily. So she was like laying there, and of course we're tired and we had been up for a few days, and so we both like lay down like to go to sleep. And the nurse was like, "Oh no, someone needs to always be watching and like make sure her face so you can see her from wherever you're laying." And I was like, "But how am I going to see her face if I'm sleeping or he's sleeping?" She's like, "Well, one of you has to stay awake." And I was like, "What?" And I should have asked the pediatrician, but so much is happening when you first like have a baby, and I was also just like on cloud nine. Like she was finally here, she was healthy, she was beautiful. Like we did it. I wasn't in excruciating pain. Like I physically felt really good. Like people have always told me like horrible post birth. I was so lucky. I like I wouldn't have known anything had happened. I felt fine besides being tired. Um, and I remember like thinking that was really weird and kind of worrying about it, but not. I don't know why I didn't ask more nurses or the pediatrician, which I really should have just asked. So we leave the hospital, we go home. The first is our second night when she's her second night alive. And again, if you've had a baby, you may know the second night is like the night that they wake up. They are like less likely to want to lay and sleep, and they want to eat, and they are a little bit more vocal. And of course, so that happened. And I started to feel like I couldn't go to sleep. It was the first time the feeling started to come up that I had like, if Nick and I were asleep, who was going to take care of Colette, our daughter? And starting to feel like something's wrong. And that's the best way for me to describe how I felt for months. And if you know me, in my personal life, you know that I've always been very intuitive, and I've relied a lot on my intuition for a lot of decisions in my life, business decisions, personal decisions, and maybe my husband. My intuition has served me very, very, very well. And I'm very aware of it and in touch with it. And that feeling that something wasn't right felt exactly like my intuition, which was alarm bells, because for me, if my intuition's saying something's not right, then I was always right. Intuition was always right. So I had to figure it out, right? So that it was really rough for me. I remember that night that she wanted to be fed a lot, and when you first bring your baby home, a lot of the times feeding the baby is a lot harder than you think it's going to be, which I knew that, but I didn't expect to feel like something was going to happen to her. And that was the feeling that I had, overwhelming. So I was really, really, really tired. I had a baby that was crying, that would be fed, that I'd been feeding, like trying to breastfeed her. It seemed like she wasn't getting enough milk, and she was like still really upset, hungry. And I like didn't know, and I had this like overwhelming feeling of like something's wrong with her. And even more overwhelming feeling of like, I cannot believe I get to get up with the baby. Like I have a niece and nephews, and I babysat and nannied, and I spent so many times with babies, and they've never been mine. I always had to give them back. Like finally have mine. And so just like when I was pregnant, and the overwhelming joy that I was finally pregnant, I finally got to have a baby, like really gonna happen to me, and miserable physically. I was so overwhelmed. I had this beautiful, healthy baby again. Like, why babies are born, health problems, like really awful. It's really awful. It happens, right? It's not something that doesn't happen. It happens a lot. And I like, how lucky are we, right? Like I was physically fine. Like I didn't have any health problems. Like everything was good. Yet it wasn't. And remember, my husband was up, and he like got her formula, and that was great because like she ate that and she went right to sleep. So the next day, my brother and his family came to meet her. And it was the first time I felt like before they got there, and definitely after, that something was physically wrong again, but with me. And so I remember calling like the advice nurse, and I was like, I hurt. I'm like, it's beating quickly. I kind of feel a little lightheaded. I feel like I don't remember the other symptoms I had, but I was like, I don't feel great. You know, they say if you don't feel good, like after having a baby, like tell them, because like there could be something seriously medically happening that you don't know. And I was just like, how much did you sleep last night? You know, like, I don't think I slept, more than an hour. And she's like, you're just really tired. You just need to sleep. Like, let your husband give your baby a bottle, just go to bed. Okay. And I wish I could say that was it. I wish I could say I was just really tired. And I was really tired. And being really tired compounded what was happening. What was happening was I was experiencing postpartum anxiety. And over the next year, it kind of got better at a year. It's still maybe really 2 years, year and a half, more like maybe like a year and a half. Not 2 years, a year and a half. I had a feeling, and it was a constant feeling her first year of life, and then it got better, was that she was going to die. I really wish I didn't have to say it like so frankly, but that was the feeling that I had. And it manifested in ways of being really afraid of SIDS. If you don't know what SIDS are, sudden infant death syndrome, or there's a couple different variations of the acronym, but it's basically baby dies in their bassinet, in their crib. Sometimes there's reasons like there's things called safe sleep, where like you don't put a blanket in with them, you stuffed animals, you make sure that they're on their back, like all these different things to make it safer for the baby to sleep. So that I was terrified of SIDS, so I had a hard time sleeping, even though I was so tired. I've never been more tired in my life, because I was afraid that I would wake up and she would be dead. I was so afraid of her napping in another room by herself, so I was afraid I would go get her and she'd be dead. I was so afraid of having her in the car seat. She hated the car seat. Like, again, before I experienced these symptoms, she already hated the car seat. And so she would scream bloody murder. She screamed bloody murder in the car seat until she was a year and a half. Like, every time. There was never a time she would just be like purple. She turned purple screaming. And so sometimes she'd scream herself to sleep. Like, we never went anywhere because it was COVID. So once in a while, we went somewhere for, like, we'd go to my dad's house, my mom's house, her brother's house. She screamed the entire time. And once in a while, she'd fall asleep because she would just scream so hard. And I'm so convinced she died. That was the only explanation for why she stopped crying. There's so many stories of this where I was like breastfeeding her, and I like turned her from one side to the other, and I was convinced I broke her neck or broke her arm one time. I thought I did. She didn't cry, like nothing happened. I just was convinced that my husband had come over, and like I was like, did I hurt her? Because like, you didn't hurt her. I was really terrified of I was so terrified of being so tired that I didn't I would be neglect, because I was paying attention because I was so tired. So I was afraid of like dropping her in the middle of the night because I was so tired. I would always wake up after I fed her and put her back in her bassinet. She never slept next to me, ever, ever. I was so terrified of SIDS. That's also like a SIDS thing, not to have them sit next to you. And it was always so hard to get her down, that she'd fall through my arm, and I'd put her down like so gently, and then she would keep screaming. It was just a nightmare. And so I would do that, and then I'd go to sleep, and then I would wake up, and I was convinced that I had been so tired that I had fallen asleep holding her, and that I had squished her and suffocated her. And I was so terrified that I would only feed her sitting up at night, so I would sit straight up. I would not lay down, because I was so terrified. I would lay down, and we would both fall asleep together. It was constant. It was absolutely constant. It was everything. I remember when she was like so new, and we went to my dad's house one night, and we were outside. It was like, cool outside, but not cold. And my husband was holding her wrapped in blankets, and she had a hat on, and she was they were under a heat lamp, and the kids were like making s'mores, and it was like a picture, like family, perfect world. And babies' temperatures, they can really vary quickly to monitor them. Something also they like terrify you with, right? Which is also important knowledge. It's like, again, it's important knowledge and is also terrifying. So I was afraid she was getting too hot because she had all these blankets on her and the hat, and she's under this heat lamp. And everyone's like laughing and talking, and I'm thinking, all I can think is, I have to get her back because she's gonna die from being overheated, and no one's paying attention except for me. And if I don't do this, I will never forgive myself for not trusting my instinct. So oh, I need to feed her or whatever. I grab her and I bring her inside, like rip off all the blankets, and like she's like, right. But I had those over and over again. I had like these like fears again, like from neglect, from being so tired, like not being able to pay attention. Something would happen to her, and like I would go to jail, and my husband would never forgive me, he'd divorce me, and my family would also never forgive me, and I'd be all alone, and I would have killed my baby that I love the most in the whole world and have wanted my entire life. I'm just so happy to have her. It was a mind fuck. Like I don't know how else to describe it. So I didn't know that it was anxiety because you may or may not be familiar with the content creator Elise Myers, but she talks about how she's had postpartum depression with her lead end of her first pregnancy. And I have dealt with anxiety, I've dealt with depression on and off since I was a teenager. And so I was very aware. I was already on medication like during my pregnancy and in like having a baby that was safe for babies. And I was very aware of the symptoms of anxiety and depression. And I knew if I felt them, I was going to go to the doctor and either, get therapy, get all the things figured out, right? What I did not know, and Elise Myers told me this like a year after I had a baby, and I saw it in a video of hers, which is postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD, which is what I developed from my anxiety, postpartum psychosis, which I also developed from my anxiety. Those are not the same as regular anxiety or regular depression. It is its own separate diagnosis. It presents differently. It looks different. So people who are used to seeing a depressed person or an anxious person or an OCD person will not recognize the signs in a postpartum person. What usually gets talked about for that postpartum person is they worry too much, they're trying to control everything, they're too stressed out, they're trying to be perfect, they're making themselves more stressed out, and then they're stressing out their baby, so they're causing all of it. I was told that by family and providers so many times. Like, this, you are creating it. This is like, if you just calm down, it will go away. Right? Like that was the message. Or this is normal and you just have to deal with it. That was the other message. Like the same thing when I was pregnant and nauseous. Like, this is what pregnancy is. Like, this is what you signed up for when you signed on a baby. It was like, this is what parenthood is. Like, this is having a baby. And I remember like looking around and being like, I mean, a ton of my friends had babies in 2020, like 10. And like, no one, I was like, are you like, it was like very taboo, right? You don't talk about a baby when you have a baby, right? Like back in, like Fight Club, you don't say those words because that is like the worst thing you could ever talk about. Being like, are you afraid sometimes something would happen? Like, oh yeah, I get these like thoughts sometimes. And like, okay, like, and then it's normal intrusive thoughts, which is like thoughts that kind of like enter your brain that something could happen to the baby or you, and they kind of go away. That is really, really common and normal. But mine again wasn't thought that would come in and then leave. Thought would come in and stay and never would leave. And more would come in. They just never left. They were just there all the time. One of my friends in San Diego, before I had a baby, and I could tell she's having a hard time because she only held him for him to sleep. So that means she never slept. She was always holding him. Like, she stayed all night holding him. He had like reflux, which is like he would like had a hard time like with his stomach and stuff. So she was always holding him. But I remember went over trying to help her, and like, I will hold him and sleep so you can sleep. And I was really trying to help her. And I also was super judgy because I was like, she's making this so hard. And like, he's fine. Like, I'm holding him and he's fine. Like, she needs to let her husband help and other people help. And like, she's kind of making this all a thing. She wasn't. She was suffering from severe postpartum anxiety. That's what was happening. And I didn't know that. And of course, I feel terrible about it now that this happened to me. That happened to me constantly. The amount of times I was told, well, if you calm down, the baby will be calm. I know I can take us all on a fancy vacation. Like, if I got me $1 for every time someone told me that. It was just insane. So I did reach out to my doctor and was like, I'm not feeling good. I'm mentally struggling. I knew I was mentally struggling. Again, I didn't think it was because I thought it was, again, I knew something was wrong and I was preventing something from happening. And so I was like asking a lot of questions about safety and, just really trying to make sure I covered all my bases. And they put me in a group therapy session, which was virtual because it was COVID. And I went a couple times, but it was, at first I felt comforted that other women were experiencing hard times with their babies and also loving their babies. But like, I think most of the women were really depressed, and I wasn't so depressed. I was more anxious. And so I didn't really have space for other people's pain because I was in so much pain. And I really nice to see a postpartum therapist, someone who specialized it. And it was COVID. There was there was no therapy. There was no chance you could have one-off therapy of it. And so, and then on top of it, I don't know if it was colic or just a particularly fussy baby, but my daughter from like ages 5 weeks to 13 weeks, she cried every night from like 6 or 7 o'clock till like midnight. Sometimes she cried till like 10, but usually till midnight. Nonstop. There was nothing to soothe her. And I remember like really trying to mentally calm my body, like listening to meditations, taking lots of deep breaths, trying just to relax my body as much as possible, bouncing on the walls, mocking, carrying her, singing really softly, making sure, of course, she was fed and changed all the things. She didn't have like digestive issues, like that wasn't what was happening. I think that just happened. I don't know. I don't know what was happening. Like, I spent way too much time trying to figure out if it was actually colic, like what was happening. I have learned a little bit since that can be a common thing for babies at that age, at that time of night. It was miserable. And my husband also had to go back to work at 6 days after my baby was born because he had just gotten a job at a private airline, which he was really excited about. Not airline, a private plane company. I don't know. I don't know what's the right word is it. He flew private. He flew private charter planes, and he had to go back to work. And then he was making so little of that he was picking up, working with students to help them pass their stuff, their licenses and stuff, which is what he did when we were in San Diego to get more hours and to make more money. So he worked every single day from when she was 6 days old until she was like 9 or 10 months old. So he was gone every day, all day. He'd be home for a few hours. And then I also had this like major guilt of like, I don't want to keep him up all night. Like, why isn't he just like why didn't I tell him just to like watch which I really wanted someone to sit and watch her in her bassinet to make sure she was breathing. That's how seriously scared I was. And he would have done it. But I also have this like severe fear of him not being rested enough and then crashing the plane because he was too tired, and then he died and he killed innocent people. And then I had my selfishness, but I couldn't just do it myself. Like, look at me. I now have killed my husband, my daughters, father, my wonderful husband, my wonderful partner in life, and these innocent people because I can't take care of my baby, right? Like, this was what I genuinely was struggling with 24/7. And my family did help. They did come over and hold her. It was really hard to go to their houses because she would cry so hard and get so worked up that when we got there, she'd be like so inconsolable for a long time. So they would come over, but they weren't comfortable with the crying, and I was told many times by people who meant well that their babies never did this. And like, between step parents and my brother's family, there was lots of children that people have taken care of and raised, and none of them did this. This was a unique me and my baby. So that obviously the case was I was coughing it, obviously, because no one else, oops, sorry, I hit my microphone again. Nobody else experienced it, right? Like, nobody else this happened for. So the only, like, the deduction was the problem was me. I was the problem. Like, there's what I should see. And if I could just calm down and relax and rest, then I could be better. She would be better. And they would come over in the mornings so I could like nap, and they would like hold her and stuff. But when you've been up all night, night after night for like 10 weeks in a row, a 2-hour nap in the morning does not suffice. And I could sleep better during the day because the nights were really hard for me. But I was breastfeeding her exclusively. And so I had to wake up every 2 hours to feed her during the day so that she would sleep better at night. It was complete chaos. It was complete chaos every single day until she was about 4 months old, when she stopped all the crying all the time, but then went through a sleep regression and stopped sleeping at all at nighttime. And that's when the psychosis hit. Postpartum psychosis, when I had visions, I was sleeping even less. It was really insane. And at that exact same time, my husband got COVID, and this is before vaccines, and exposure periods were very long, and he has an autoimmune disorder, and so he had to be in quarantine. He came home, he was in Kansas because he got an upgrade, and he was in Kansas for 20 days in January to get his upgrade. So he's gone for 20 days. He comes home the next day and tests positive for COVID. He quarantined for 20 days. So I went from 20 days of being alone to him coming home for a day, and then Colette and I were exposed, and so then we had to quarantine. So like my mom couldn't come over, my dad couldn't come, no one could come over and like hold her so I could take a shower, because she during the day would not sleep unless she was being held. And she also needed to be held all the time. If I ever put her down, she'd just scream. And so I had no help, and we had to quarantine, and he was in isolation. So he couldn't help me because there was a chance that we also didn't have it, and then he would have given it to us. No, then I was in quarantine for 2 weeks. He was in isolation for 20 days. That's when the psychosis hit. That's when I would start to lose my mind. That's the first time I did sleep training, and she started sleeping better, but it was never great. And I remember having a lot of guilt around that because I did need to sleep because I was seeing things and I was losing my mind. I remember thinking I should probably go to the hospital because I'm losing my mind, but being terrified that if I went to the hospital, they would say, "You're crazy and we're taking your baby from you, and your husband now has to quit his job and take care of her because you're clearly incompetent." And I was breastfeeding, and now we're going to try to give her a bottle, and she went from loving the bottle to hating the bottle and would now need like a feeding tube. It was all because I couldn't figure it out. That was the only advice, like, all because I created it, and all because I couldn't teach her to sleep. Like, again, the overarching like thing that pediatricians, loved ones, people were like, she just sleeps. You should just like teach her to sleep. Like, all of you guys slept. Like, all of my patients' babies, this is what they do. This is what we all do. Like, you kind of you're not figuring it out fast enough, and you're the only one to blame. I don't know if they meant that to be the message. I'm sure if you asked a bunch of people who told me this, they were like, no, that's never what I meant. But that was loud and clear. It was never like, this is insane. What you're experiencing is insane. Like, you're like, I was told I was doing a great job, but I also feel like people were telling me that just to like keep me a little bit calmer. So that is basically my postpartum anxiety psychosis story. Because of this, the psychosis was temporary, that one very small period of time until my daughter started sleeping more and started sleeping through the night. And there's a lot of shame comes on more than the dad. So that's why I would say mom. Because you can have these symptoms no matter your gender, but as a mom, um, I there was a lot of shame around sleep training and not sleep training. Do people have very strong opinions? It's kind of like with anything in parenting, there's really, really strong opinions, and people who you know and trust have strong opinions, and they often differ. And that is really hard to navigate as a parent because you really want to feel like you're making the decisions that are best for your child and for yourself. And so I wasn't against sleep training. I really liked rocking her to sleep. Again, like I was so happy to hold a baby. I mean, I just remember like looking down at her and being like, I can't believe she's mine. I wanted just to rock her to sleep and put her to bed, and like that was what I wanted to do. And um I did sleep train her. It wasn't like we didn't do cry out. I think that was like very strategic and whatever, but it was still heart-wrenching and very painful. And um I didn't expect how much pain I would have just doing daily things with her. Like she's a more challenging baby in the sense that she hated the stroller. Like Zoe walks outside, never helped her. She always wanted to be held, but then she was born in a cooler time, even though we lived in California and it was like windy outside and she hated it. She just I just I felt like I was failing always as a parent. I just felt like I just nothing I could get like I couldn't take her for a walk in the stroller, like simple face. I couldn't put her in the car and have her take a nap. I couldn't, lay her down for a nap during the day. Um, it was just a lot. Like if I would leave her with my parents, a lot of the times I was like, I remember I really tried to working out because I knew was like 6 months old. I knew exercise was really helpful. I knew I was suffering. I started to put together that something was wrong with my mental health, not with me, when she was around 6 months old. And that was mostly because I was part of a breastfeeding support group that was kind of an ad hocly put together by a lactation consultant that we all knew, and we all had our first babies within like 2 weeks of each other. There was 4 women in the group. We all were breastfeeding, and we all first time moms. So it was so amazing. We texted all day, every day. And I saw that they had similar struggles with as me, but I noticed that they, right around when she was like 4 or 5 months old, I started to be honest with them about the things I was afraid of, and I realized that was not universal. That was a non-common thing. They didn't shame me. They were actually incredible. These women were my closest confidants at that time in my life, and will always hold a very special place in my heart because nobody else could help me with AFib. It was very powerful for me. So that kind of started realizing like something had happened to me, not that I was creating it, and that was a huge like moment for me. And I think this is like just a life lesson. Like even like working with acne people, like acne happens to certain people, not others. And of course there's things that can help you if you have anxiety, but you didn't create it, right? So anyways, I tried to start working out and going to the bar method, which is an exercise I've always really enjoyed. And the place I went to had a free childcare at the time. And I was in class, not even 15 minutes passed, and they came and got me, and they said she wouldn't stop screaming, and she was literally like beet red from screaming so long for so hard. And it took me about 30 minutes to calm her down. So I had even just put her in the car seat so she wouldn't like vomit in the car seat from crying so hard, because she hates the car seat. And so I remember just like breaking down in the car, like, I'm just trying to exercise, and like I can't even do that. I'd be with my mom or my dad, and the same thing would happen. They were like, she cried the entire, like, I could hear her crying when I like came out to the house, and she cried the entire time. So it really deterred me from doing anything without her, because I couldn't handle the fact knowing she was screaming the entire time. It literally physically felt like someone was ripping me open. And it was easier than trying to like bring her places. So we just stayed home, which made everything a lot worse, right? And so then I started developing OCD, postpartum OCD, which is also a particular kind of mental illness. It's not hormonal OCD, where I was really trying to control everything in my environment so that she would be okay and then I would be okay. And it was not a good thing. It was not a good thing for me. It was not a good thing for my husband. My poor husband was trying so hard to do everything he could to help. He had no idea how to help me. He was totally also very overwhelmed and exhausted in his job and as a single parent and all the things. And I was really just surviving, like literally minute by minute, day by day, even past the point of her crying all the time. It was just, I really never was away from her. I remember my stepsister got married in July. She's my October, so the following July. And I had my stepmom, who isn't my mom's husband's married. So my stepmom was a different side of the family, came to babysit my daughter, but no one else would ever put her down to bed successfully. My husband couldn't do it. She just screamed like crazy. And so he went to the wedding, saw the nuptial ceremony, and I stayed home till she went to bed. And then I left. I remember driving over to the reception and thinking, I haven't been outside in the dark since before she was born, or like right after she was born, that one night that we were out. Like, it had been almost like 9 months. Like, I hadn't been, like, the sun was setting and I hadn't seen the sunset, like, because my house, I couldn't see the sunset from where I lived. I was just like, it was kind of like I felt like I'd been living underground for like 9, 10 months, and I couldn't believe that like people were outside at night and like people were like doing things and like eating dinner. Like, I remember just being like, is this like, can this really happen again? It kind of felt like when I was pregnant and I was so sick that one of the things that I struggled with is I felt like I was gonna be sick for the rest of my life, because it never got better for 5 months. And I remember when I could eat again, and I was like, I can't believe I can eat. Like, it was just crazy. And the same thing happened. Like, I can be outside after dark. So after she turned 1, I started to feel better, and still struggling a lot with the OCD. And um, it was everything just had to be just a certain way, so I could feel okay. It's really the best way for me to describe it. I'd have to do a lot of examples, but again, if you see a mom acting this way, we're done. But definitely a more of a mom thing. My hope from this podcast is that you have empathy and you don't blame them for the situation they're in. If they are hyper controlling and be controlling and their votes about naps and bedtime and routines, it's not because you're trying to control everyone and everything. It's because keeping the routine consistent makes the baby the happiest, which was definitely the case for me. Like, if we went off the routine and just went to bed an hour later, it was such a nightmare. And even now, like, she can't go to bed late. She won't go to sleep. She'll end up staying up for another hour crying past her already late staying up. And then she wakes up, like, if I kept her up 10 minutes late past bedtime when she was like a baby, like under the age of 2, she'd wake up 4 a.m. the next morning. 4 a.m. right away. There was no way I was getting back to bed. And that's not the case for all children, but that was definitely the case for mine. It is not as severe now, but like if we mess with her needs, her sleep needs, her mealtime needs, we try to push it around at all, like there'll be just a lot of crying. And so I would stick to a really strong schedule because of that, because I didn't want to like keep her awake when she was clearly needing to sleep. And I didn't want to like not feed her when she was really hungry, you know. But if you're out in the world socializing with people, this is not acceptable. Like usually, and I've heard this before I had kids and I still hear it. It's like, oh my gosh, the parents are so, you know, strict. The parents are just so like everything has to be just so. And I I really hope that if you've felt this way before, this can give you a little bit of insight that I wanted to be the parent that my baby took naps in the car, that like we would go, like I had one of my good friends lived an hour and a half away. I envisioned like feeding the baby, putting the baby in the car, driving the baby, my baby would nap. We get there, have a visit, feed her again, put her back in the car and drive back. Like I envisioned like living with my baby by my side. And she would just kind of fit into my life. Like you hear people say, like they just fit into my life. Like they just come to dinner with us and like lay in their car seat or bassinet and like just hang out, or I just hold them, and it's like not like that just never happened. And because of that, a normal routine, which I think a lot of parents and babies really love, became really obsessive for me. Where if we didn't stick to it, even if she was fine, I wasn't. And I couldn't relax or enjoy myself, which was really hard. It was really hard for me. It was really hard for my husband. It was a lot. She finally weaned just under a year and a half. And for me, and this is not the case for everybody, but for me, when I stopped breastfeeding, I wasn't feeding her a lot at that point, but some hormones changed in my brain, and I felt maybe in like 2 weeks. I think it takes like 2 full weeks for the milk to stop producing. I felt like a completely different person. I felt like my old self again. I think for some reason, breastfeeding was a very interesting thing for me, because once we figured it out, it took us a couple weeks to figure out, but once we figured it out, it was the only time for months, like probably the first 9 or 10 months of my daughter's life, that I felt like she was okay, that she was not in danger, something wasn't going to go wrong. I would get like a rush of serotonin and dopamine and all the wonderful like hormones. But then what I think happened is when I wasn't breastfeeding, which was, you know, hours of the day, I would get a huge drop in them. And so the ups and downs of those hormones really was not good for me. So once the hormones were totally gone from my body, I felt like myself again. I literally felt like the lens my whole world was on just like lifted and was gone. And then sadly, the aftermath of living like that essentially for a year and a half was severe depression and being afraid of going back into it. And I think now we are 2 years later from when I weaned, and I feel so much better. But I have a lot of sadness and pain when I look back at my baby's beginning of her life, because I feel like I was so present and I was there every day and playing with her and doing all of the things that I always dreamed of. But I was also suffering so much like when I was pregnant, where I was so excited and so miserable. And I wish I had a magic crystal ball and someone could have told me, just formula feed her so you aren't having these hormones ups and downs. I know this is the only time you feel good is when you are breastfeeding, but I promise you'll feel better not doing it. And that's obviously not the case. And there's no way anyone could have predicted that, because that's not the case for everyone, for sure. But I'm better medication, so I could have really enjoyed her as a baby more than I did. because as much as I did enjoy it and as excited I also was just every moment was like panicked. So when she was around that same time as Janine, I finally found a postpartum therapist who was incredible, and I had to pay for her out of pocket, which I was fine with because my husband had been making a little bit more money then, and I had a little bit of childcare because I was working a little bit. I could kind of squeeze it in, and she had told me that essentially my body was in fight and flight for the first 9 months, for sure the first 6 months, 9-ish months, and on and off from like 6 months to a year. And having your body in fight or flight, like there was no, except when I was breastfeeding, there was no moment I wasn't panicked. That really is a lot for the nervous system to overcome. So I've done a lot of stuff like EMDR and different ways to help reprogram my brain and go back and soothe my nervous system. I for a long time could not hear a newborn baby cry. I would completely panic because again my nervous system was like on nonstop. So I was having a lot of like long-term effects from this like the really intense period of time in my life, my baby's life. So I'm still processing some of it, but it's definitely more of a scar than it is like a fresh wound. I knew I wanted to wait until I could talk about it without crying, I could talk about it without getting really sad, and I could see it more like this is what happened versus the lot of pain around it. And I mean, it definitely have pain. I think I'll always carry some pain about it, but it didn't go the way I had hoped it would go, and I was suffering so much. And obviously the circumstances were also really crazy. COVID. My husband, we had been trying for a baby for a year and a half, and if we had had a baby when we first started trying, it would have been a much more ideal situation for our family. And then we, of course, had a baby when it was like a really tough time in my husband's career, just because it just ended up working out that way, even though that's not what we planned for. And so it was just all this perfect circumstances overlapping for like the perfect storm of really hard things. And I know that, like, from therapy, my therapist has been very good at like helping me figure out like what was like, no one experienced, or, this is like a really unique situation. Of course, this was really horrible. But I still like have a hard time when I see parents of new babies and their parenting together, because really until we moved to the Atlanta area, which is where we live now, like almost a year ago, my husband and I always parented just like a divorced couple. Like it's either I had the baby or he had the baby. We almost never were together with her because he was gone so much. Like from when she was born until a year ago, he was gone 22 days a month, usually. Sometimes a little less, like 18. And then he would come home and I would be not only physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. I had almost no break. I only had break when I worked, and that was like 6 hours a week. And I would be like, here's the baby, and I would like be gone. I just needed to be alone so badly. I needed to like shower without anyone crying. I needed to just like eat a meal without holding a child or running after a child. I had like my basic needs were just like not there for so long. So then he would just solo parent and I would just like essentially like disappear into my shell. And then I had to come out of my shell and he would go back to work and we just kind of traded off the child. And now that one of the reasons we moved here is so that he could be home more, it's like the main reason. And we can like do things as a family that when he comes home, I'm not so exhausted because he's been gone for so long that like maybe I need an hour to decompress and then we can like go to the park. Like we had never gone to the park really as a family until recently because I'm like, I live at the park. So if you're home, I'm not going to the park. I think a lot of stay-at-home parents would have similar experiences, but I didn't have a spouse coming home at dinner time to help me with bath. It was still me. And I think I have a small understanding of what it would be like to be a single parent when you have no other parent and you are working full time and trying to take care of children. I cannot eat, like, I didn't have to provide money for us to eat and have a house to live in, so I don't, I remember thinking, and I also had a lot of guilt around that. Like, what am I complaining about? I have a husband that's like loves me and is supportive and like is a great dad and is like bending over backwards to help me and like not know what the other was, knowing it's OCD and like catering to everything I ask of him and working really, really, really hard to have money for our family. And I like it's not enough. Like I'm still miserable and I still feel alone all the time. Like what's wrong with me? So a lot of guilt around that. So I do, if you are a single parent, I definitely have so much more respect for you than I ever would have imagined. So that takes us to present day. And so right now I'm doing really good, may hear my daughter playing with my husband in the background right now. I'm doing really good. And we seeing my husband so much more than I've seen since before he became a private pilot, which is what he was in 2020. And my daughter really lets us all three times like spending time together. And I feel like our family we're so much happier as a whole. So it's been a really good experience moving here together. And he never has to work on schedule again, which is also amazing. And I mentally am taking care of myself. I'm exercising regularly and sleeping so much more. Things that two basic things that are super important to have a healthy brain. And I'm getting a lot more time to myself, time to work, which I love to work, time to read and have hobbies like I've talked about in this podcast have been really helpful for me, my mental health. So I'm doing good. We're doing good. I think my husband is feeling good. The question always comes up, I'm sure a question you're wondering is if we're going to have more kids. That's a common question, of course. When I was younger and in my 20s and my early 30s, I always imagined myself with like all my little ducklings, like having 3 or 4 kids. And we had agreed on 2 for sure. And then maybe a third. And I was kind of hopeful for a third. But I am confident to say right now we have no interest or plans to have another child. That may change. I think we had such a chaotic 2.5 years that we are everything's really peaceful, and the chances of me having another pregnancy with the nausea is very likely. And the chances of me experiencing the same postpartum anxiety is also very likely. And to be honest, I don't have any interest in doing that again. Even if I could get better medication and support and doctors that believed in me, I don't want to do it. I had such a strong desire to have a baby, and I thought I would want that strong desire to have a second baby. And maybe time will change, but my husband doesn't have a desire either, and we really love having one child. She's at a really fun, I mean, every age is honestly fun, but she is a little person, and we just have so much fun together as a family. And she's out of the baby phase and more into kid phase, and that's a totally different way of she's not napping, and we don't have to worry about that. We can go somewhere during the day, and we're not trying to get home for napping and that. So we just are really happy with our life. And so probably not, we're not saying never yet, but probably not likely. Who knows? Well, maybe we'll change our mind. And I just thought I would have felt really sad about that. If you told me 5 years ago you're only gonna have one child, I would have been like, what? Because I do love children, love children. And I always have since I was a child. I've loved children. But parenting a child, especially parenting a child by yourself, which I still do a lot, is a totally different level of space and commitment than I truly understood. And I also am very mindful in my parenting. I think my parents did a really good job with me. But there's a lot of things I want to do differently. And what I found is if you want to change like parenting cycles, particularly, it takes a tremendous amount of mental energy to respond differently than you were responded to. Like, I don't want to yell at her. So if I feel frustrated, the energy of not yelling is very exhausting. Like my husband, that is not something that he really experienced. And so it's not that hard for him, like not to yell. But it's really hard for me to really add a lot throughout the day. And so I know for me, bringing another person into that equation would strap my resources. Of course, I would not have as much sleep. I would not have free time. I'm not having myself. I've had a newborn. And I'm not really making a sacrifice, really, for myself or for my daughter. So, and for my husband and me, our relationship. So I would have been really sad a couple of years ago if you had told me that. But I am not sad at all with just the one. I'm actually really satisfied and I really like our life and I don't feel like anyone's missing. So yeah, that's that. So I hope today my story, I know it's really long. I'm sorry, so long. I hope it was helpful for you, for if you yourself have experienced this, that you don't feel like you feel less alone. If you know people who have babies or are in this, stage of life, I hope you have more empathy for them and not blame, particularly the mom, for like being too rigid about things and other things. Like one of my friends, both of her babies have had a lot of digestive issues. They get really bad stomach aches and crying. My child never experienced that. So when she tells me it, it's really easy for me to think of solutions, but I remind myself, I don't know what I'm talking about. I've never had a baby experience what like she's describing. Now, if you've had a baby that cries a lot, like I can tell you what helped me, didn't help me. I can speak to that if you're asking my opinion. But I have to even remind myself now, like, you don't know what you're talking about. This person who's telling you that they're suffering with their small child or their baby, like, you just need, like, what you need to do is just, like, listen and believe them. Like, don't minimize it. Don't tell them this is normal. Don't tell them this is what all parents go through. Don't tell them, well, maybe if you weren't so X, then that wouldn't happen. None of that is true or helpful. What they really want you to do is believe them. I wish people had believed me when I said, I would tell people I'm really worried she's going to die. I wish people had believed me because if people had believed me, I would have gotten more help. People would have my husband would have he didn't really know like if that was like he just thought that was just like a normal thing that moms are like protective of their babies and like scared for their babies, like I wish people would have believed me when I said the things that I was seeing and not be like, oh, she's just tired or oh, she's just worried about things and, she's like worried about SIDS and like it's not that likely and, all the things that people say to like either help you feel better, in quotes, right? Or because they don't really know what to say. So they just say things like, yeah, this is hard. I'm sorry that's happening, as opposed to like, this is awful. Like having a baby eat food and like be crying for 2 hours is like torture. Like I'm so sorry. Like, can I come over and hold the baby when they're crying so you can take a walk? Like, can I bring you food because you can't stop to eat, like make food if you're holding a crying baby? Can I take your other child to the park? Actual believing them and not minimizing what they're telling you and saying that, oh, just do this or, whatever, but like believing them and actually trying to help in ways that are actionable or that can really do something for them. I think my last point in this is to believe people who are pregnant and have a brand new baby and believe what they say. If we think back to what I said in the beginning of the episode of women of color, particularly Black women that are ignored for their symptoms regularly in the hospital and then end up dying for it because people don't believe them. People ignore. People minimize what it is. Like, oh, that's not a thing. It's not a symptom of this. Well, it's not a symptom of preeclampsia for a white woman, but it is for maybe a Black woman, and they're not even educated and they don't even care to even explore it and be curious that something could be wrong. You just immediately go through the lens of that they already know, and they just dismiss things. And I was dismissed so much. It was the most I've ever been dismissed in a medical setting in my entire life. And I was certain that would not happen. I had never experienced that kind of gaslighting. And even talking to like OBs afterwards, like the just like like attitude was just shocking to me. And it's one of the things that I want to put money towards from my business, like from my profit towards nonprofits to help women, especially women of color. Because it's just, something has to change. Like, women have to be believed if they're in pain or if they're suffering, and they shouldn't be blamed for it. And if our culture had the opinion of women have the most knowing of themselves, and they deserve to be comfortable, and they deserve to be sane and healthy and treated with a huge amount of respect, so many women wouldn't be suffering right now as they are as a country. So many women are suffering as new moms or soon-to-be moms, and they don't have to be. They could get help that could change their experience for them. It could be better. It could be a lot better. There's like just so much that is deeply ignored. And because it's inconvenient. It's inconvenient. They just don't. They care about the baby surviving and you surviving, but they don't care about anything else. They don't care. Like, I didn't have traumatic birth, but a lot of people do. They don't care if they want the baby to be alive and you to be alive. That's all they care about. A lot of providers. Actually, when I gave birth, that wasn't the experience, and that's why it's such a big experience. Like, every nurse, midwife was fully, like, they were present with me and talking to me, and like, we worked together to like make sure I was okay mentally and physically, and it was wonderful. So I went from that to like also then being like told, all these things and kind of ignored regularly by doctors and stuff. So, but I think it can start with awareness, which is why I made this podcast. I think awareness will be helpful so that if you are in the world where you are meeting a parent or soon to be parent that is suffering, you can identify like, oh, they're suffering, and you can have empathy for them and compassion and no judgment, and hopefully if you're close to them, give them help that they really need and don't even know how to ask for. So that's it for today. I know it's a really big, heavy episode. Not something that's going to be happening regularly, but I really did want to share my story. So I hope it was helpful for you. I'll be back next week with a normal business podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you then. Bye. Hey, if you like this podcast, please rate and review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. I cannot tell you how much that helps my podcast grow. So you can click 5 stars if you like it and you want to give me 5 stars. And please leave a review about telling me why you like it so that I can help other estheticians grow their business. Thank you so much.